Hi, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. We are continuing in the Magic Circle by Katherine Neville. And because I forget often, let me remind you, if you haven't subscribed and you would like to continue to follow the story, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It's free to join. There's no subscription fee. And you want to click that little bell tab, and then you'll get a notification every time a new video posts. All right, so in our last video, Caligula was telling Claudius about the past, his relatives, his father, his grandfather, Tiberius, the guy, the captain, the sea captain, a few chapters back that rode by the island and yelled, "The great Pan is dead." Talking about items that Pontius Pilate was after, and the sword that killed Jesus, basically, on the cross. Well, it didn't kill him, he was already dead, but confirmed that he was dead. Anyway, all kinds of these things, and he's trying to talk about all these relics that can be very powerful, and of course, we heard that from Uncle Laf as well. So, oh yes, and they were drinking wine with a pearl in it that dissolved, so maybe not a real pearl. And Claudius was beginning to wonder if perhaps Caligula had poisoned him. But that's kind of where we left off. And the next section is titled The 13 Sacred Hallows. Each aeon, A-E-O-N, eon, when during the vernal equinox, the sun starts to rise against the backdrop of a new astral constellation, a god descends to earth and is born into the flesh of a mortal. The god lives to maturity among mortals, then permits himself to be sacrificed, shedding his prison of flesh to return to the universe. Before his death, the god passes on universal wisdom to only one chosen mortal being. But in order for the divine wisdom to become manifest within chronological time on earth, it must be woven into a fabric of knots, representing the intersections of spirit and matter throughout the universe. Only the true initiate, the one indoctrinated by the god, will know how to do this. To make this connection, 13 sacred objects must be brought together in one place. Each object fulfills a specific purpose in the ritual rebirth of the new age, and each of these objects must be anointed in the divine fluid before it's put into use. The objects for the next age are these: the spear, the sword, the nail, the goblet, the stone, the box, the cauldron, the platter, the garment, the loom, the harness, the wheel, the gaming board. He who unites these objects without possessing the eternal wisdom may bring forth not an age of cosmic unity, but one instead of savagery and terror. You see, said Caligula when he finished this diatribe, what I told you about the spear at the crucifix in Judea, why, a spear was the very first object on that list. Do you see what it means? Tiberius thought Pan was the god who'd permitted himself to be sacrificed in order to bring about the new age. The goat god, the god most closely identified with the Isle of Capri, or with himself. But when that stone at Paxi had been translated, it proved it was the Jews, my dear, who'd provided the necessary fleshly cadaver, for this transition. Isn't it the Jews who are running all over the world studying ancient languages so they can translate the mysteries? And maybe also collecting these objects of infinite power. Do you think for one moment your Joseph of Arimathea didn't know what he was doing when he begged Tiberius for the return of his people to Rome? Do you imagine he didn't know what he'd done when he stole the body of that crucified Jew in Judea? For that's what he did, and took the spear Gaius Cassius Longinus had plunged into it as well. Good heaven, Gaius, please desist, cried Claudius, dropping his spinning head to his lap as his stomach churned with too much emotion and wine. Bring me a feather. I need to be sick. Can't you concentrate for one tiny moment on anything? Said his nephew, getting up and bringing him a bowl and an ostrich plume from a nearby stand. Claudius lifted his head and waved the plume through the air to loosen its tendrils. Then he opened his mouth and tickled the back of his throat until he retched and the wines from his stomach splashed out into the bowl. That's better. Now I'm clear-headed, he told Caligula. But in the name of Bacchus, tell me what all this means. It means, said Caligula, that while Herod Agrippa goes to Judea to find out where the other objects may be, you and I are going to Britannia to find Joseph of Arimathea and get that spear. All right. Well, we're going to a different section of the book. We're only 7 minutes in, so we'll continue. This is titled The Return. Foo/return, the turning point, hexagram 24. The time of darkness is past. The winter solstice brings the victory of light. After a time of decay comes the turning point. The powerful light has been banished, returns. There is movement, but it's not brought about by force. The idea of return is based on the course of nature. The movement is cyclic, and the course completes itself. Everything comes of itself at the appointed time. Richard Wilhelm. The I, capital I, Ching. The more one knows, the more one comprehends, the more one realizes that everything turns in a circle. Johann Wolfgang Goethe. I was still jangled. Okay, so now we're back in 1989. This sounds like Ariel. I was still jangled despite steeping myself in a steaming hot pool for more than an hour. What with Uncle Laf's informative report on the Nazi collaborationist stormtroopers and Boer rapists ornamenting my genealogical tree, not to mention my adorable gray-haired Aunt Zoe in Paris, who danced her way right into Adolf Hitler's heart, my family history was starting to look more and more like the stuff of my chosen career, a mess that was plowed under and kept buried for half a century and just starting to ooze out of containment. When Laf went off for his afternoon siesta, I went back to my room to be alone and do some thinking. I sure had plenty to think about. I knew my cousin and blood brother had faked his own assassination and set me up as the public patsy. But it now seemed he'd done it using the very manuscript that was so zealously guarded by his own father, Ernest, and my grandma, Pandora, too. A manuscript my father and stepmother, aided and abetted by the world press, were conniving to snatch and publish for profit. And though I still wasn't clear what this mysterious manuscript was all about, it did seem beyond the shadow of a doubt that the document I'd interspersed throughout the DOD standard last night must have been sent by Sam. I'd thrown away the brown paper wrapping, so I couldn't examine the postmark. But the moment Laf mentioned it, a vivid image flashed before my eyes. That yellow postal slip Jason had retrieved from the snow, Jason the cat, with a sender's zip code that began with 941, meaning it was mailed from San Francisco. So Wolfgang Hauser's claim that he'd mailed it to me from Idaho was a myth, like maybe everything else he'd told me. I kicked myself for falling for just another gorgeous face, and I vowed that even with the aid of an avalanche, he'd never catch me off balance again. It might already be too late to undo the damage now that I knew the document was sent by Sam. Wolfgang had been with it all night. And since I was asleep, I had no way of knowing if he'd examined it or even microfilmed it or maybe made some other kind of copy. So basically, I'd come full circle to where I had been a week ago. Between Scylla and Sharbus, a rock in a hard place. As I unlocked the door to my hotel room, I realized I'd forgotten completely about Jason. He was sitting in the middle of the king-size bed looking angry as hell. You. Wait a minute. No, yes, Jason is a cat. Not you. Yow. Y-O-W. Yow, he said in a tone that packed a wallop for a feline fury. Of course, I knew exactly why he was furious. Though he had plenty of food, I'd gone swimming without him. The telltale scent of chlorine gave me away. Okay, Jason, what about a nice bath instead? I suggested. A cat that likes to swim in a pool. Instead of dashing into the bathroom to turn on the tap, as he usually did when he heard bath, he trotted past me and plucked from the floor a slip of pink paper I had nearly stepped on. He was really good now at the paper fetching trick. And planting his paws on my knee, he presented it to me. A phone message that had been shoved under the door. When I read it, my heart sank. To Ariel Ben, from Mr. Solomon. Sorry, can't make lunch at noon as planned. To book again, please phone, and there's a phone number. Terrific. Sam was suddenly changing our noon agenda, and this bogus phone number, as I assumed it was, would fill me in on how. This was Sam's third mention of King Solomon, whose biblical verses I still hadn't had time to scan closely for hidden meaning. But this note seemed a hasty last-minute change rather than a major decoding job. And Sam could safely assume that the name, after my little deciphering job of last night, meant something to me that no one else would grasp at first glance. That is, that the phone number for Mr. Solomon pointed to the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon. When, with a sigh, I opened my bag, hauled out the Bible I'd brought along, and took it into the bathroom, where I plugged up the tub and started the water running for Jason, the cat. As I waited for the tub to fill, I looked at the note again and flipped open the book. The Song of Solomon has only 8 chapters. So area code 214 referred to chapter 2, verse 14. O my dove, that art in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the stairs, let me see thy countenance, let me hear thy voice, for sweet is thy voice, and thy countenance is comely. Sam would never get to hear my sweet voice or see my comely countenance unless he got a mite more specific in his instructions. He did. In chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, there was the young woman I recalled the one with the very attractive belly button, asks her lover where he'll be lunching at noon the next day, and he explains how to find him. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as one that turneth aside by the flocks of thy companions? If thou know not, O thou fairest among women, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tent. Right. That tells you where they're going to meet, right? Now, there was no place up on the mountain that had a name relating to shepherds, goats, or other flocks. But there was a pasture land down the road from here called the Sheep Meadow, where in summer, music and art tents were set up. In winter, it was a popular area for Nordic skiing, a flat open field with easy access from the road. So this must be the new locus of my rendezvous with Sam. But it seemed more than strange that Sam would opt to change his former complex trail covering scenario to a high visibility spot along the main road. Seemed odd, that is, until I read chapter 2, verse 17, saying when we were going to meet. Until the daybreak and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved, and be thou like a roe or a young hart upon the mountains. Daybreak, like before dawn? I could certainly see why Sam might consider a meeting at high noon too conspicuous. And ski lifts up to the mountain to reach the spot of our original assignation wouldn't even open until 9. But how could I inconspicuously drive 3 miles to the sheep meadow before sunrise, haul my cross-country skis from the car, and go for a spin all by myself in the pre-dawn darkness? I thought Sam had gone completely out of his mind. Luckily for me, everyone in my menage wanted to make it an early night too. Apparently, Oliver, once he'd seen how well Bambi could ski, had outdone himself trying to impress her, dragging her onto black diamond slopes all over the mountain. He returned exhausted, unaccustomed himself to such intensive Sturm und Drang. Okay. There's not a natural breaking point, but I think we're going to stop here anyway. So yeah, interesting the way the Bible verses sort of tell her where she's supposed to meet Sam. All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.